Good morning. Today is the 22nd day of Kislev, the 5th of December. We're now on learning Tzitzit and on page Tet Zayin, which is page 31 or 16. So what did we see yesterday? We said yesterday that the fact that Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, are called Yisrael, when God gave Jacob that name in last week's Parsha, 2 weeks ago actually, what it means is that we have a head. So what does that mean? So he says the head is made out of two parts, the skull and the brain inside. The skull represents will, and here we're talking about the higher will, the will that doesn't have ostensibly a reason behind it. There's no reason for what it wants. Here we're talking about God's will. Why does God want us to do this and that? Usually you learn there's no reason behind it. However, there is a brain inside, and he writes like this. What?
Who are you referring to?
God. We don't mean God himself because he doesn't have a skull or a brain. We mean abstractly this is referring to God's will, and inside the will there's a brain. There is something. So you can't get to the brain. It's concealed inside the skull. What you see is the skull. But then he writes, "V'derech hagulgolet gdeilim hase'arot me'amoach." Now there's this very interesting anatomical observation that we have no idea what in the world it's talking about, because it's not talking about human anatomy for sure. It's talking about some kind of spiritual anatomy. And in this spiritual anatomy, the hairs that grow out of the head are actually coming from the brain. So they're considered to be like little, I called them straws, I think last week. Like little straws that penetrate the skull, they go through it, and they bring something of the life force in the brain outside. Now here, we're not talking about this head. There's no question in the world. What in the world we're talking about, nobody knows. I mean, a lot of people tried to figure out what this is talking about. I asked Rav Steinsaltz once. What is it? Where did they get this? Why do they say this? So he says that hair follicles are known to be hollow inside. Hair is known to be hollow. He says there's a certain state of hair in which it's hollow. I don't know what in the world he's talking about. That's what he told me. Of course, that doesn't explain at all how is it connected to the brain. It's not connected to the brain. But he said the very fact that it's a conduit that can be seen as something hollow, that itself is enough to say that this is where this came from. Okay, but anyway, this is a common staple throughout Kabbalah, that the hair is a means of accessing the brain marrow inside. It's in everywhere. It's the idea. This idea exists everywhere, meaning that through the hair you can get to the brain marrow. I don't know. You know, we do this. We do take marrow from bones, and we do that with a lumbar puncture, right? What else?
Oh, so I understand.
There is a way to do it,
yeah, so
but we're not talking about that. I don't know what this is. And anyways, he says, "Ki hasa'arot chalulim," because the hairs are hollow. Uv'tocham yesh k'tzat yanika me'amoach, and there is slight taking out of sustenance from the brain inside. In any case, this is what's called v'hu inyan hamshacha metzumtzemet me'od me'od me'achochma והטעם הכמוס דרך גילוי הרצון להיות משיגים זהר שם מיני מעלת הטעם הכמוס. He says, in any case, this allows you to get an inkling of what the reason behind the will is. Because we said the will is the skull. And there is a reason inside. So we're saying to Hashem, this is the image. We've taken something anatomical that we don't know what anatomy exactly we're talking about. And we're saying from this anatomy, this spiritual anatomy, that the abstract meaning is like this, that within the will there is reason. Even there is a reason for the mitzvos. Okay? There is a reason. God has a reason for it. We just don't know what it is. But we get an inkling of it through the hair follicles. So in Adam Kadmon, in this spiritual entity called primordial man, he has hairs, and the hairs are a way to access an inkling of what the Tam HaKamus LaRatzon is called. The hidden, concealed reason behind the will, whatever that is. V'zeu shoresh hagan eden. And that is the highest root of what we call inner light. Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, paradise. Why? Because this is the highest form, again, of something being understood. Meaning the reason behind why God wants you to do this and that is a taste of paradise. It is something, because it becomes an internalized light, because it's supposed to make sense. All of Hasidic thought is built that way. Meaning everything that we know, everything that we explain, what we're explaining now about Tzitzit. If I go to the Torah, what does it say? It says just the higher will. It says, look, you need to put on tzitzis. You have a four-cornered garment, you need to put fringes on it. And it doesn't say even how to tie them, but let's say I know how to tie them. That's what you need to do. I ask myself, why do I need to do that? He says, what are you talking about? This is God commanding you. There's no reason. But then you start taking apart. Okay, so now let's explain what this is. Remember, he mentioned it here, that Moshe Rabbeinu, he saw Rabbi Akiva, and he saw the way he taught. And there's always a wonder, what do you mean he had piles and piles of laws that he learned from each one? Remember we said of the crowns. What are these crowns? What is this? So if you look at a letter in the Sefer Torah, you see that it has little tags on it. And sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 1. This is what's called these follicles. Okay? This is one explanation that to me makes a lot of sense. And that is what Rabbi Akiva taught. He taught from these crowns, he taught the inner meaning of the letters. The letters are like the skull here. The letters are the black ink, the skull, and hidden within them somehow is God's, not only his will, but also why he wanted this. And so Rabbi Akiva, by accessing through these crowns, it's like he's getting through the hair follicles. They're like the hair follicles. So that's one decent explanation I like very much, that's what this is talking about. And then, indeed, in the writings of Rabbi Isaac Luria, these crowns on the letters, these little tags on the letters, they have tremendous meaning. We divide the alphabet into 3 types of letters. Those that receive 1, that have no tags, those that have 1, and those that have 3. And when you really get into it, and especially one of the more Hasidic explanations of the mitzvos is a book called Heichal HaBracha. It was written by, now I forget, can't remember his name right now, the Kumarna. The Kumarna Rebbe, he wrote a tremendous work called Heichal HaBracha, and he goes mitzvah by mitzvah through all 630 mitzvot in the Torah, and he explains their meaning a lot of times through these crowns.
There's a Kumarna Rebbe now.
Yeah.
From before, or is it?
A long time ago.
Okay.
This Kumarna was in the time of the Maggid of Mizrach. Okay. ואומנם על ידי קיום המצוות ממשיכים הישראל גילוי הטעם הכמוס בעצמו. And now he says, just so that you know, the moment that you perform a mitzvah, you are already bringing out the reason, except that you don't see it, right? All you see is the will. You see the encompassing light, which is what's causing you to do the mitzvah the way you're doing it. It causes you to act the way that you act. It's just the encompassing light. But you are pulling out some revelation of the hidden, concealed reason behind what you're doing. And right now it's not revealed. And that's what we mean that in the future it will be revealed. What will be revealed? This inner light. So now he says there's encompassing light. We said there was encompassing light in every act that we do. And that is not revealed now. So now he's homing in on what exactly is this. He says this is the meaning behind the mitzvah. And there's a statement from the sages that in the future the reasons of the Torah will be revealed. Ta'amei mitzvot, or ta'amei Torah. I'm sorry that I'm not clear on the difference between the two. But here he means ta'amei mitzvot. He means the reasons behind the mitzvot will be revealed in the future. Remember we said that is the world to come. That is the world of the resurrection. The moment that you receive from the mitzvah that you performed, what do you receive? You receive the light that was until then encompassing light, and now it becomes internalized. Why? Because it originally was internalized, but you couldn't access it. Okay? And that's why the Jewish people are called Yisrael. Why? Because we said that when you permute the letters, that becomes I have a head. And what we're saying by that is that we have a head, meaning we have access to the skull, to God's will, and we also have access to what's inside the skull. It's just that right now it's not being revealed. But in the future it will be revealed why God wants you to put fringes on the way He wants you to, why to keep Shabbos this way, and so on. Prinat rosh, galgalta, vemocha. The head that contains both the skull and the brain inside. וזה סוד מאמר הז"ל בשעה שישראל אומרים האמן יהיה שמי רב המבורך, הקדוש ברוך הוא מנענע בראשו. And this is what it means that when, it says in the Talmud, in the beginning of Brachos, that when we answer Amen Yeh Shmei Rabba, when we answer the Kaddish, Hashem is shaking his head, like nodding. Why is he nodding? That is the way that the sages brought in an image this tiny bit of access to the brain inside. Meaning that you get some kind of inkling of what the reason behind it is. Now there's a famous story that appears in the Yom Yom that goes with this. Unfortunately, there he doesn't tie it into what we just learned, but it's clear there that that's what he means. There's a story about Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl, who's a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, but was the eldest student by the Maggid of Mezrich, that he was very obese, very. And they said that he never ate. So how did he become fat? Or, he ate minimally. So how did he become so fat? So the answer was that he takes pleasure out of saying Amen Yeh Shmei Rabba. That when he says Amen Yeh Shmei Rabba Mvorach, what it's saying here is that when you answer the Kaddish, you get an inkling of the pleasure that you will get in the world to come. That's what it's saying. How do we know this? How did this? So this is very interesting about Kaddish. Kaddish is not connected to Tchias HaMesim. It's not connected at all to the resurrection of the dead. It's apparently an ancient prayer that was composed sometime after the destruction of the temple, because it's in Aramaic. And that was the language that they spoke then. And over the generations, it somehow was upgraded to be a remembrance for the past, for those who were deceased. And we have the longer version of it, which also came somehow. I think it's based a little on the Zohar, but we have the longer version that we say when we finish a Masechta, some book. Usually it's a tractate of Talmud. The question is, why do we say Kaddish after that? The whole connection. Why is Kaddish even connected to the deceased? There's no connection.
You talking about
Kaddish.
Hagadol?
Yeah, that's one that's called.
You do it also in Levite.
Right, and there we mention specifically Tchias HaMesim. There we mention it specifically. Yeah. But even in the regular Kaddish is associated with the deceased. And everybody, somehow in their minds, associates it with resurrection of the dead. I don't know why. But he says this is not for nothing. That even these strange customs that we developed, we don't know exactly even where they came from. They come from this statement in the Talmud that says that when you say Amen Yeh Shmei Rabba Mevorach, which is itself is based on a pasuk in Yechezkel, but let's not get into that now. So you are getting a glimpse of the pleasure of the world to come. What did we say the pleasure of the world to come would be? So he said, on the one hand, it's resurrection of the dead. So that's why this prayer became associated with the deceased. But it's also, like we said, the world to come in the sense of going to after the soul departs the body. And so after you finish learning, you say this prayer because it's like saying, whatever I understood this time around when I learned the tractate, that's well and fine. But in the future, I will understand it much more deeply. There will be a resurrection of the dead. We said, what does resurrection of the dead mean? It means that I learned something, and I understood what I learned, but I know that part of what I learned is also dead. Why? Because I didn't understand everything. When I don't understand everything, it's like dead. That's what we call it. There will be a resurrection when my soul is in Gan Eden, and there they will teach me even the meanings that I didn't understand in this time around. I mean, what I understood until now is very nice, but there's many more levels of meaning. The brain is deeper. The reasoning behind it is deeper. And I'm waiting to be able to listen to that. So that's why we say Kaddish at the end of a tractate. Okay?
I see, because there's nothing connected with, quote, death.
Right. There's no mention of it there. זהו המשכה. המשכה זו עדיין נעלמת היא, ולעתיד לבוא תתגלה לעינינו כשיחיו המתים במהרה בימינו אמן. So he says, here he focuses on that. Now, so this is very, very interesting thing. What I want to, we're getting towards the putting it all together. But I want to say already now, what do we do with the tzitzis? Let's say the tzitzis now we understand they're like hair follicles. And they're meant to access the encompassing light, at least at some level. What is the one thing that everyone does with the tzitzis, apart from looking at it, which hopefully people do? Not everyone does that. They kiss it. Why? Why do you kiss the tzitzis? Because what is the word tam in Hebrew, which means meaning, the meaning behind the will, in Hebrew also means taste. So how would you symbolize that I'm tasting from the reasoning behind the mitzvah? I guess I'm not really kissing it, I'm actually tasting it. Yeah, but I do it like kissing it. You have to understand that everything that we do symbolically has very deep meaning. We look at it as, this developed like this, like that. There's all kinds of theories about how it developed. But in the end, we trust the basic symbolism in simple actions. This act of taking the tzitzis and kissing it has got to, has got to have people asking, what are we talking about? When we kiss a Sefer Torah, it's the same thing. Why are we kissing it? Why would you kiss it? Maybe that's a show of respect. When you, Sfardim a lot of times kiss people, tzaddikim's hands. Yeah. What are they doing? Because when you kiss, you're trying to taste. You're trying to get a taste of what is more deeply hidden, concealed inside, and that act is symbolic of it. Okay, so there's a lot to think about, a lot to process, especially this part about saying the Kaddish after the tractate, which is really out there. Like why in the world? Because there's only so much I understood, and when I say the Kaddish, it's like I'm bringing back to life, or I'm hoping to bring back to life. You still have time. I'm hoping to bring back to life all the meanings that I missed, everything that I couldn't get to in this time that I learned it. And in Gan Eden, I will learn this. Okay, so let's end here.